Hello, and welcome to the Naftiko Capabilities Podcast. My name is Kin Lane. I'm the Chief Community Officer here at Naftiko, but you might also know me as the API Evangelist, where I've been talking about the technology, business, and politics of API since 2010. This is my podcast where I interview interesting people about interesting topics relevant to APIs, integration, and other things that I'm working on each day. So recently, I'm neck deep in spec-driven development, and I'm really looking at all of the specs journey from Swagger to OpenAPI to Async API. I even had a conversation with Anil Dash about Markdown. I'm working my way through the different specs, doing a lot of talk about MCP, agent skills, even Claude.md and other artifacts that are controlling the API lifecycle. But I'm trying to reconcile all of this in terms of design first, spec driven, context engineering. I'm just working my way through all the different parts and pieces. And I recently had a conversation with Chris Hood about experience API design. He had written some things a while back that caught my attention, and I wanted to sit down with him and better understand his perspective of this kind of intersection from experience-based design, which is I think a part of design first, but how does this look as it collides with this AI moment?
Yeah. Well, this actually goes pretty far back. So, in addition to my time across a lot of different types of mediums, I spent about 5 years working with Apogee and when APIs, probably longer than that, but spending a lot of time talking with various corporations who are trying to implement API strategies across their ecosystems. And one of the things that continuously surprised me was just simply in the design of APIs. Now, there are a lot of opinions out there about how to design APIs, and yet all of them basically follow, like if we were to dissect it, I would feel as if I think they all follow a fairly similar kind of paradigm. But when I was explaining this to companies who were really not familiar with APIs or API design, I needed to find a way to simplify what they were, how they worked, and put it into really everyday language. And so if you do that and you start to explain things like in a story per se, and you say, well, look, you have a customer who would like to book a flight on your airline. That's the API. You're basically trying to build a connection for them to be able to book and share that data and have that connection happen. And when you break it down into kind of that language, people say, "Oh, I get it now." And as I started to explore that concept more, I realized that as we were trying to design APIs within the language that we're familiar with, CRUD-based methods and endpoints that were often exclusive for whatever internal systems they had, it became a lot easier to just say, well, look, if you want to book a flight, then call it book flight, which then got us into this mindset of, well, if we change the language of API design and wrapped it around the methods and started to remove the concept of CRUD, then could we simplify this in a way so that as APIs are being designed, they also have contextual understanding, not just for systems, but also for the humans who are using them. And that's what got us to that point.
That's why I think this gets at the moment that I'm trying to assess here around spec-driven development. I think there's a lot of things that we experience with design first, with API design in general, that are kind of being negotiated in the agents .md, Claude.md, these markdown files that are controlling things, and people aren't always that good at using their words and expressing things from the right perspective and understanding sophisticated ways of articulating this, whether that's in an open API or in a rules.md or claude.md. So I asked Chris, how do we get people, why are we struggling so much, finding the right words to use, and maybe is AI, I guess, gonna help us with this?
To take a quick step back, and maybe this helps us get into that, is when I was trying to sell APIs, like you need APIs, you need Apogee, you've got to build these systems within your organization. What you start to realize is that, well, if you're selling it to the engineers, they all know exactly what they're trying to accomplish. But if you switch that and you try to actually sell it to a CEO, they have no idea what you're talking about. And they'll usually push you back over to the engineers. Like, that's technology, go talk to the engineers. And I've argued for years that APIs are actually a business language as opposed to a technology language. Like, they're monetizable. You all of your business is basically operating on APIs. And so if you want to generate more revenue and generate better experiences for your customers, then in language and make it a business asset. But that conversation always reverted back down to the engineers. And then when you get into that technical CRUD, that technical, and I'm going to use CRUD multidimensionally there. When you get back into that engineering language, well, everybody is set with how we've always done things. And one of the interesting things is I was having a conversation on LinkedIn with somebody else about the exact same topic, and their response was, "Can we not please? Like, we already have enough design and sort resources and schematics and everything else around APIs. We don't need something else." But if we look at the evolution of APIs, well, we didn't have REST, and then REST basically transformed how we communicated on the internet. And now we have agent. Solution is the best solution to solve a new problem. I don't believe it is. And so if we start to continue that down that mindset, we've got to break through these old mentalities of, well, we've always done it this way. It works. Why recreate the wheel or whatever else the argument is? When in reality, what we're trying to accomplish, especially with AI and agent-based systems, we are nowhere ready, even capable of doing that with existing REST-based platform.
Agreed. Definitely my view of the landscape as well. But how do we, get people to actually care about APIs enough so that they're going to want to, get our levels of quality up to what is needed?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think, I feel it's obvious. Like, there needs to be a shift in how we build APIs. Like, that's just my mindset. I see it. And especially when I start to see like MCP being so glorified right now, my first instinct was, why are we introducing a protocol, basically a server-based system architecture, to solve a problem that APIs by design are already capable of doing if we just adjust how APIs are designed? Like, we think about security. Well, okay, MCP doesn't really have good layers of security in. APIs have built-in open, open specs and OAuth 2 already available for it. So we're like trying to go backwards to solve a problem that's, inherently the answer is we'll change the way we've built APIs. Similar to how we change from SOAP to REST and REST to we need something else. And so what I think has to happen is we have to start to come up with these new ideas. The one that I have right now out there is Agentic API, and we can talk a little bit about what that is. But it's a new design paradigm for agent-based API calls and agent-to-agent communication. It does not require, or it won't require, a downloadable server component. When we say it's a protocol, it's a genuine protocol that is embedded into the web. So you could potentially call it through HTTP, or I've even proposed, like, well, let's set up another protocol. We'll call it AIP, Agent Interface Protocol. So you would do all of your API calls on AIP / your API. If we start to rethink about it, instead of saying, well, we already have the solution, it's already baked in, we've already have all of the rules and regulations and regulatory and compliance issues that require this, and we say, okay, well, let's start over. Like, let's come up with something new. interested. Okay, this is, relevant. I recognize there's a lot of challenges to that. Like saying that we are going to implement a structure where there are new methods that are exposed in the HTTP layer. Okay, like that's a lot easier said than done. You have a whole regulatory committee that is going to have to approve that. But that's where we're at. And I think if we can get to that point, then these opportunities for product and for marketing, even when we start thinking about agent systems being able to communicate, that becomes a lot more accessible to the average person. And that's the key, because as long as we keep this into the engineering domain, you can talk about vibe coding all you want, but as long as we keep AI APIs in the engineering domain and not expose them to the, the average or, the community developer, if we can make that change, then I think it becomes a lot more viable and a lot more interesting.
I agree. It's the alignment with business that I'm always looking for. It's why I'm having this spec-driven conversation from the engineering as well as the product vantage point, because there's that bridge that's needed there to kind of move these things forward and make it so that we're aligned with the business outcomes. And so I guess, a lot of these files, these new files, the Claude.md, the rules.md, these are all in service of Copilot, Agentic, kind of the software development lifecycle. So I guess, we've got to, end on, how can AI help us at this layer? How does Chris see what AI is going to do for us when it comes to helping us manage this experience based design approach?
One of the things that, we really haven't touched on, even within the AI space and agent type of philosophies, is that can we make the API itself more intelligent? And that's one of the things that I'm attempting to do with Agentic, is to say that, okay, well, look, book, or summarize, as an example, could be any number of different contextual endpoints. If I say schedule, like what do you mean? Like schedule an appointment, schedule my something on my calendars, coordinate with my team. So how do I start to build some of that into the API itself, so that when the API says, okay, summarize this document, it's actually executing the needed API to then go grab the document, contextualize it down into a fragment, and then return it. And I think a lot of times, we're simply looking at it as client side, not activating the transaction. Well, but what if? What if the API itself could actually facilitate additional logic and any type of semantic or contextual or compatibility, any type of extension to the API, so that if it wasn't available or if it didn't have everything it needed, that it could also help facilitate so that it could provide the information that the agent is looking for.
Yeah, I did an interview at Tuesday's live session. That'll show up as a podcast in a couple of weeks. About they have a Slack channel where the agents complain about the walls that they hit, and so they were talking about the different ways they look for the need for skills. So support channels, Slack channels, documentation, and they generate skills based upon that. And so adding that human in the loop, but also I guess that agent in the loop where they can complain and kvetch about what skills are needed, is one way that you can constantly align and dial this in and make it so that the skills are more precise and being used appropriately. Anyways, interesting stuff. Lots more conversations coming up at this intersection of spec driven, because it's a big circus tent. There's all of our legacy, from EDI to WSDL to Swagger to OpenAPI to Async API to this new breed of agent skills, MCP, and the other artifacts that we're dependent on. So lots more conversations going on at this intersection. Stay tuned. All right, see you at the next one.